Solgaleo-Shiinotic is on the rise, but so are predators for it. Let's go ahead and dive on into our weekly meta report for Pokemon Pocket and talk about the most popular and best performing decks in our community tournaments from this past weekend. We had almost 1,000 competitors play in our largest Pokemon Pocket tournament, with the starting field being fairly diverse. Buzzwole variations accounted for 22% of our deck list, Solgaleo-Shiinotic clocking in at 12, Silvally-Rampardos at 11.5%, Darkrai-Giratina 7%, Silvally-Zeraora 6%, Silvally-Charizard EX 5%, Blacephalon Silvally 3%, and Guzlord variations at 3%. Looking at some week-over-week comparisons of our starting metagame distributions, we see some predictable movement from the first week of the Extradimensional Crisis metagame. Specifically, Buzzwole Ultra Beast variations and Solgaleo-Shiinotic both increased in starting metagame share. They were two of our strongest performers last week, while Silvally-Rampardos shrunk a considerable amount as it struggles into the before-mentioned decks that are putting up strong performances. Darkrai-Giratina remained relatively stable, which tracks with the fact that it had not a good or explicitly bad performance in our first week of tournaments. The fifth archetype we were tracking last week, Charizard Incineroar, fell to nearly a 1% play rate in this week's tournaments and also struggled in terms of performance, so it's no longer making our pie chart. We have several new Silvally variations that weren't seeing play last week, as well as Guzlord solidifying under a single banner at around 3%. To try and draw some conclusions about the strength of the deck list we're looking at this week, we will measure the difference between the starting metagame and the metagame of the deck list that had 6-2 or better records in our tournament. We saw 6 of the 8 archetypes we're looking at here increase their share between these two groups, meaning they overperformed, and we saw 2 reduce their size, meaning they underperformed. Specifically, Buzzwole Ultra Beast and Darkrai-Giratina saw 36% and 50% increases between these two different measurements, meaning they were our strongest performers this week, and Charizard Silvally and Silvally-Rampardos both underperformed, losing metagame share between the starting and top performing deck distributions. Buzzwole variations this week remained largely the same, both in the cards that they're playing and their matchup tables against the other popular decks. They excel against Silvally-Rampardos as well as against Darkrai-Giratina, while struggling to find success against Solgaleo-Shiinotic. One important distinction in Buzzwole variations, though, is that builds playing 2 Kartana as opposed to those playing 1 or none were on average a lot more successful in the tournament matchups. This is largely due to the fact that having 2 copies of Kartana takes matchups against the various Silvally decks, playing things like Blacephalon, Charizard, and Oricorio, and takes them from a struggle to being a bit positive in a lot of instances. I would wager this is especially true in the matchups where Oricorio is running around, as having an efficient non-EX attacker is key in getting through the yellow chicken. Stop me if you've heard this one before, but as we head on into another metagame, Darkrai-Giratina is once again one of our strongest performing deck lists. Notable innovation in a lot of the decks this week is a single copy of Nihilego alongside 2 copies of Poison Barb in the equipment column. This makes your recoil for people attacking you early with quick attackers hit a lot harder, as they effectively take 40 damage per turn cycle, 20 on each poison tick. And this gives you a really clean way to interface with opposing copies of Oricorio that could otherwise be frustrating for your all-EX deck to cut through. As far as matchups go, this deck list is poor against the Buzzwole variations, but it excels against the other 2 most popular decks, which are Silvally-Rampardos and Solgaleo-Shiinotic. Against the lesser played decks on our pie chart, the sample size is smaller, but the matchup spread is also pretty interesting. Darkrai-Giratina looks to excel against Charizard Silvally, looks to be relatively even against Silvally-Zeraora and Blacephalon, but it struggles against Guzlord variations. While there were a number of Silvally variations that popped up this week, Silvally-Zeraora was both the most popular among the new ones and the best performing of any Silvally deck this week. While there were a lot of different takes on what this archetype could look like, pouring over the list, the most successful ones look to be playing 2 copies of Zeraora and 1 Oricorio, with a number of them also leveraging a copy of Dawn as a potent supporter. This seems really powerful in the games where you have first evolution advantage, as Zeraora gets that free energy, and then on the second turn, you can evolve type Null into Silvally, Dawn a second energy up to it, and crack for 100 points of damage before your opponent can even attach their second energy. Copy of Oricorio also gives you powerful game against all the various decks that are leaning on EX attackers in the metagame as well. A lot of this archetype success seems to be based on the fact that it has an incredibly strong Solgaleo-Shiinotic matchup, and that deck became a lot more popular this week. It's also favored against Silvally-Rampardos and Buzzwole variations, with the big asterisk: the better performing Buzzwole variations featuring 2 Kartana flip that script on its head and are actually favored against Zeraora. Among the lesser played things, your Charizard matchup with Silvally is quite strong as well. Solgaleo-Shiinotic is definitely the best deck beater in our current metagame, absolutely dominating all of the Buzzwole variations as well as Silvally-Rampardos, but it does struggle a little bit into Giratina Darkrai as well as Silvally-Zeraora, which is likely why those 2 decks had strong performances this weekend. It'll be interesting to see if the Solgaleo-Shiinotic deck can innovate to fix some of these problems. This sample deck list that I have up here on the screen is the exception rather than the rule in this weekend's tournament, playing 1 copy of Duskmane Necrozma, one of our recent promo cards that can hit for 100 points of damage for 3 energy as a metal attacker, and this particular player actually bested the Oricorio variations when it ran into them, so it'll be interesting to see if we see more widespread adoption of Duskmane, since that card's primary drawback is it has a higher retreat cost, but Solgaleo's ability to Rising Road into the active spot mitigates this pretty cleanly. Silvally-Charizard struggled a little bit overall on the weekend, but looking at its matchup table, it's easy to see why so many people reach for this deck list as opposed to Charizard Incineroar that had been the most popular Charizard variation last week. This archetype is solid against Solgaleo-Shiinotic as well as Buzzwole variations, but it does come up a bit short against Darkrai-Giratina as well as Silvally-Rampardos. The second of those deck lists also had a tough performance this weekend though, so if we see Silvally-Rampardos continue to decrease in metagame share, this Charizard Silvally could be one to exploit this as we move forward. The verdict on how to build Guzlord looks to be in, with the most successful and popular variations featuring 2 copies of Neoligo as well as 2 Celesteela, with Naganadel nowhere to be found. This is unsurprising to me, as we've seen a lot of metagames develop favor playing fewer total Pokemon cards. You have lots of room for powerful utility cards like these deck lists do. Looking at the matchup spread, Guzlord looks to be the kind of Gyarados or polarized matchup deck of our metagame, really struggling against Solgaleo-Shiinotic and Buzzwole, which are quite popular right now. However, it's really good into things like Giratina Darkrai and Charizard Silvally. I think this means as we see the metagame develop and move more, Guzlord could be a tool we see competent tournament players reach for if things shift in a way to make its more favorable matchups popular and the matchups where it struggles less so. Silvally-Blacephalon feels like a really solid bit of deck building. Silvally is obviously one of the more popular dynamic cards from this metagame, being splashable in so many different places because it's colorless, and Blacephalon is an incredibly powerful artillery attacker when paired with Lusamine, allowing you to jump 2 energies onto the Blaze as soon as they take down your lead Silvally, letting you crack for 130 damage effectively out of nowhere, making it something your opponent has to respect at all points. This deck list feels like it could be something of a sleeper pick as the metagame develops more, as it's really strong against Buzzwole, relatively even against Solgaleo-Shiinotic and Darkrai-Giratina, with the one place it struggles among the more popular decks being Silvally-Rampardos, which was one of the worst performing decks for the second week in a row, which likely means Rampardos is going to continue to shrink in metagame share as this format develops more. Speaking of Silvally-Rampardos, we've mentioned it a number of times as it's a popular deck, and here's a sample list that was successful in this past weekend's events. There weren't really any notable innovations for this deck overall, and as I mentioned a few times now, I wouldn't be surprised if this archetype continues to shrink in metagame share, as its matchup table seems fairly unfavorable into a lot of the things that are becoming increasingly more popular as the metagame develops. If you enjoy the weekly data-driven meta report for Pokemon Pocket, please smash that like button to help the video reach some more people. If you're someone like myself who likes to keep your beat on the metagame but enjoys playing more off-meta things personally, make sure you're subscribed to the channel as well so you don't miss our new decks roundup tomorrow, where I'll be highlighting some of the most unique and innovative things that spiked individual results in tournaments for the past weekend. I think the metagame, the way it's shaping up, seems to be in a pretty solid spot, and I don't think we've seen movement among the popularity in the top deck settle, and we'll see further development next week. As always, I appreciate everybody that made it all the way through to the end of the video, and I hope your next Pokemon Pocket Pack is an excellent one.